back. Well, One Direction has released a joint statement following the death of bandmate Liam Payne in Argentina, saying we are completely devastated by the news of Liam's passing. In time and when everyone is able to, there will be more to say. But for now, we will take some time to grieve and process the loss of our brother, who we loved dearly. Joining me now is GB News host and Sky News contributor Emily Carver. Emily, thanks for joining me. Look, One Direction, they split years ago, but this was a British band created by X Factor in the UK. What's been the reaction over there to his death?
A huge amount of sadness. It's been leading the news agenda since we found out the horrific news. It's such a tragedy. There's been an outpouring of emotion for those who followed One Direction, a huge amount of love, tributes flooding in. Of course, people want to know all the details and they're wanting to find out exactly what happened in the run-up to this awful incident. But he had an absolutely massive fan base. I remember watching him when so I'm 32, he was 31 when he sadly died, sort of followed his journey from the audition process. He was just 14 when he first auditioned for X Factor. Simon Cowell said, you know what, you're a bit young, come back in 2 years. He came back when he was 16. That's when they formed One Direction, and he was just propelled to this crazy level of fame. And it's just so tragic what's happened in such a short period of time, that we'd get to just 31 years old. He's got a small child. It's just terribly tragic.
It's so tragic. You're right, he was so young. And look, more details have now been released about the cause of his death. What more can you tell us?
Well, we know that he fell from the third floor, 45 feet from a hotel in Buenos Aires, from the balcony in the hotel. We know there was a very distressed phone call made to the emergency services just before he died, saying he was aggressive, saying he was clearly under the influence of drugs and alcohol, that he was smashing up the hotel room. We've now seen pictures from inside that hotel room. They found medicines, including clonazepam, which apparently is a drug used to control epilepsy and muscle spasms and those sort of things. That was all in his hotel room, alongside other drug paraphernalia as well. It was clear he was in an absolute state. We also find out today, the Daily Mail is reporting that he was dropped by his record label, Universal Music, as recently as last week, because his records weren't selling enough and they were making changes at that record label. So I don't know if those things were a factor into his state, that clearly he was in such a state, such a bad state. But we know he's been quite troubled for quite a while.
Yeah, clearly. Look, it's just a real tragic set of circumstances, that's for sure. Look, let's move on now to some politics, because there are calls for motorists in the UK to be slugged with more car taxes as the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, looks to incentivise electric vehicles. What's going on there?
This is so classic here in the UK. You know, if you own a petrol or a diesel car, if you dare to own one of these cars, you are going to be clobbered. The government have been warning us since they got into power that this upcoming budget at the end of this month is going to be brutal. They have to make tough decisions. Things are going to get worse before they eventually get better. You know, we're expecting billions, if not tens of billions of tax rises. So it would not surprise me if they decide to go after motorists. They're usually a prime target for the Chancellor to try and claw back some money. But these left-wing think tanks are really urging the Chancellor to come down on petrol and diesel cars. And the thing is, a lot of these people who work at these think tanks and are urging the Chancellor to do this don't drive themselves. They live in the city centre. They may live in London. They use the tube and the buses. They don't understand that most people in this country still rely on their cars day to day, and most people can't afford electric vehicles, and God forbid, maybe they don't want one.
Exactly, and this is exactly what's happening in Australia too. They punish those with a petrol vehicle, yet the majority actually drive petrol cars. It's ridiculous. Now, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have reportedly purchased a new home in Europe. It seems like they almost want to edge closer back to the UK, Emily.
Yeah, this is very interesting, isn't it? So apparently this area of Portugal is known as the Malibu of Europe now, the Hamptons of Portugal. So very much an upmarket area where they're going to be buying a place, apparently. But yes, this seems to be the closest Meghan Markle will get to Britain. There are suggestions that perhaps they want a golden visa, that's what's being dubbed, so that they can access the European Union, all of Europe, without without having to show their passports, essentially. But they have previously spent some time in the country. They went for a little romantic mini break last September. So perhaps they've fallen in love. They've also got family, fallen in love with the area, I mean. But they have family also out there. And I don't really know what the plan is, but it's quite interesting that it couldn't be Britain. It had to be a Portugal. That's quite close, but it's still quite far.
No, look, it couldn't be the UK, could it? They wouldn't want to show face back there. Emily Carver, good to speak with you as always. Thanks for joining me this evening.